Okay, so welcome everybody to our FLT Connect event with Heather Houskeeper, the botanical hiker. Heather, have I lost you? Okay, well, hopefully Heather will be back. My name is Christy Post. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications with the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. And tonight we have with us Heather Houskeeper. What I was saying before some of you came in that Heather was having some connection issues, and so we were kind of working through that, and I wonder if she had to go out and we'll come back in, so we'll keep an eye out for her. This session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube station afterwards. On our YouTube station is every past issue of FLT Connect that we have done since June or July of 2020. I'm going to put a link in the chat here to our FLT Connect page on our website. It has a list of all the upcoming events. We're going to Gear for Adventure in Buffalo shortly here to talk about gearing up for trail season. We've got a panel discussion with two of the fastest known time record holders on the FLT. We're doing a map presentation, which is another back by popular demand presentation, as this one is, all about navigating our maps and map tools. Bunch of different events coming up, couple more still in the works, not yet on the calendar, but they will be soon. So I want to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about the Finger Lakes Trail Conference before we get started. The FLTC was founded in 1962, and we are celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. We have a lot of different ways that you can celebrate with us. The first and the easiest is by signing up for a free hiking challenge, the FLT 60. You hike 60 miles anywhere on the Finger Lakes Trail in this calendar year, and you earn yourself a sticker and a patch. And this is this year's patch, which is lovely. We have our county hike series starting in April, and that is our most popular hiking event that's been around, I don't even know how many years. But each county, we cover a county each year, sometimes two counties if the mileage is low, usually about 60 miles total. So this year is in Tompkins County. So if you do the county hike series, you not only get the patch for that, but you get the FLT 60 patch because it's just about 60 miles. So that kicks off in April, and there's a hike each month until September, and that series concludes at our fall weekend celebration, which will be held this year at the Greyhaven Motel in Ithaca. And if you're not familiar with the Greyhaven, let me just tell you, I'm very excited about this year's fall weekend event because this venue is really cool. It's an old, renovated roadside motel. There's a fire pit, and there's very close. You can actually walk from the motel to the Finger Lakes Trail. The owners are great, local. It's really cool. We're really excited. So we'll have some entertainment there. We'll have good food there. There will be lots of hikes in and around the Ithaca area that weekend. So stay tuned for information about that. And we have some information on our website about some other hiking events. We have a number of free hiking series. So if you go to our website, it's under the Explore the FLT page. And we're adding to that really as we're scheduling things right now. So if you're interested in getting out and exploring the FLT, we have a Hiking 101 series. We have our Hike and Happy Hours with Steuben Brewing Company in Steuben County. We have a new series with Recovery Fitness, which is a sober, active community in Rochester, New York. And we're doing a hike a month with them across the Finger Lakes Trail. There are Hiking 101s all across the state. They use the Passport Hikes, which is a free hike book and the most beautiful patch in the world ever, honestly. You can earn if you do the Passport Hikes. So be sure to check those out. I want to thank any members and donors who are here with us tonight. The Finger Lakes Trail Conference is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are funded almost entirely by membership dues and donations. So thank you to all those of you who are former members, current members, or soon to be members. And thank you for all those who donate in any way to the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. The trail was built and is maintained entirely by volunteers, but the FLTC now has a couple of full-time paid staff people. I'm one of them as the Director of Communications, and Michaela Aney is our Director of Trail Development. Together, Michaela and I have created a new FLT ambassador program, which we are looking to train volunteers to work out on the trail and help spread the word about the FLT and get some information about the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. The trail is entirely maintained by volunteers. We are definitely a volunteer-driven organization, so I encourage you to become involved. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Houskeeper, who is the only person still who has ever hiked the entire Finger Lakes Trail, main trail and branch trails in one continuous journey. She is very well known as the botanical hiker. And this is her second time doing an FLT Connect presentation. It was so well received last time we had to have her back. So I know you will enjoy this, and take it away, Heather.
Thank you, Christy. Please tell me if my connection is not up to par. Hopefully I'm coming through well. But let me just begin by saying, for those of you who may be new to the Finger Lakes Trail or the Finger Lakes Trail Conference, this is an amazing trail. So please do join up with the conference, get to know folks who are part of the Finger Lakes Trail community, because this is one very, very special community. I can vouch for that by hiking nearly 1,000 miles on this trail. All the amazing folks that I met along the way, which was, I set out to get to know the plants, and the people were just this huge added bonus. But tonight I'd like to share with you about 10 plants that you could find on the Finger Lakes Trail, and also in your own backyard and other wild spaces that you enjoy visiting. You do not need to go to the Finger Lakes Trail to find these plants, nor harvest. Best to harvest from your own property, or a wild space that's kind of forgotten. There's a lot of thickets out there, a lot of places on the edge of urban lands that are great places to harvest. Of course, being mindful of pollutants and that sort of thing. But these are plants that you can find this time of year or coming up in spring. I did want to dip a little bit into those spring plants just because there are so many good ones out there to get to know and to taste. So let's see. Without further ado, let me get my slideshow up for y'all. Let's see if we go to, oh, no, we want to go to, okay, bear with me, folks. Okay, so is everyone seeing that? Maybe Christy can give me a yes, because I can't see any of you now.
Yes, I'm seeing it. Can you?
Okay.
There you go. Yep. Perfect.
Good?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And if there are questions throughout, please put them in the chat.
So let's dive into the good stuff here. Yeah. All right. So firstly, chickweed. This is one of my favorite wild edibles. Scientific name is Stellaria. There are a number of different species of Stellaria that you could easily encounter. The one that you're seeing here is Stellaria media, or the common chickweed. There is also Pubera. This is our native chickweed. And Stellaria aquatica, which is that which you see on the left-hand side there with the long stalks. So both common chickweed and Stellaria aquatica, or water chickweed, you are very apt to find in your garden, in sunny or shady, grassy areas on your property. These are non-native chickweeds, so you can feel free just to pick to your heart's content. And then your Stellaria pubera, or what we also call the great chickweed, our native chickweed. This one you're going to find more in a woodland setting, and you can see that from the photo there with the foliage just beyond the flowers. But any of your chickweeds are going to have 5 petals that are so deeply cleft, they look to be 10. The leaves will be opposite on the stalk. And you can see that that stalk is almost succulent. It's really got a fleshy sort of juiciness to it. And that's something that I really enjoy about chickweed. It is sweet and crisp and refreshing. You can eat it raw. You certainly can cook up chickweed as well, but you want to just lightly saute it. If you throw it in a pot of soup or something, it's just going to get pretty stringy and thin rather quickly. You're using the above ground parts. So that's the flowers, the unopened flower heads, the leaves, the stems. So anything you see above the soil. Now, in addition to chickweed just being a tasty trailside edible, it's also a great first aid plant. So you can by all means crush this plant up in your hands. You can chew it up and spit it out. Do what's called a spit and chew poultice and apply that to itchy bug bites, poison ivy. You could even make an infused olive oil out of chickweed just by essentially taking that chickweed, drying it ever so slightly, and then cutting it up or breaking it apart, putting that in a mason jar and covering it over with olive oil. Allow that to sit for a couple of weeks and then strain out your chickweed, and that oil is excellent topically. Also for bug bites and the like, or even as a moisturizer. So this is just a very moistening, cooling, anti-inflammatory plant. So you can think about that too when you're eating this plant, that you're going to be ingesting those same qualities. Old timers in the Appalachian Hills used to consider chickweed a blood cleanser or a blood purifier. It was one of the first greens that would come up as our temps started to warm. And it was thought to just enliven the body, remove stagnancy, bring some fresh spring energy in. And chickweed you certainly will be seeing very soon. You will also see this flower in the fall. So it is a cool weather plant, and I've seen it flower all the way into early winter if the temps are mild enough and it's in a nice sunny spot. And here you can see with that Stellaria aquatica, or the water chickweed, I harvested that just by pinching at the base of the stalk. You can also use a scissor. And then right beside that, there are some violet leaves. And I'm actually not featuring violet in tonight's talk, although that's another great early spring wild edible. So our next plant, garlic mustard, Olearia. All right, third time I'm getting it. Olearia petiolata. So this is definitely a non-native invasive plant. So get to know it and get eating. You'll be doing Mother Nature a service. To find, hopefully, only on the edges of your property. It likes the edges of forest. It will creep its way into forest as well. I have certainly seen it on trail. It is a plant that is capable of producing hundreds of seeds per plant, and the deer don't really care for it. So it's got a couple of advantages. It will drop that seed on the soil, right beside the mother plant there, and then the deer will come by and eat the other plants surrounding garlic mustard and just work those garlic mustard seeds right into the soil. So this is a plant that is typically in abundance. You aren't usually just going to find one little plant. You're going to find many. But how do you identify garlic mustard? So garlic mustard is going to start out with what you see here as what we call a basal rosette. So these leaves are just arising from the soil. Each leaf is heart-shaped. They will tend to have a rounder tip when they are in the basal rosette form. As the leaves travel up the stalk, they'll get more pointed at the tips. If you crush a garlic mustard leaf, you are going to smell strong garlicky aroma. So that is your, your surefire way of knowing that you have garlic mustard and not just some other heart-shaped leaf. Now, as the plant matures, it will grow tall and it will flower terminally. The flowers are your typical mustard flower. They are four-petaled and in a cross sort of shape. The plant will grow about 3.5 feet tall if given the right conditions. Now that photo on the left-hand side, those are unopened flower buds, and this is my most favorite part of the garlic mustard plant. You can just pinch those flower buds right off. You can eat them just like you would a broccoli floret. And keep in mind that garlic mustard is a member of the brassica family. It is related to broccoli, to kale, to cauliflower. So although this is not a veggie we're really familiar with, it's not all that far from the veggies that we're used to eating. Studies have actually found garlic mustard dating back to usage in BCE era. They have found fragments of garlic mustard in pottery and such. So this is a plant that's long been appreciated, long been consumed. It is native to Asia. Now, in addition to those unopened flower buds or those little garlic mustard florets, the leaves are pretty good raw. You're definitely going to want to pick them before the plant has flowered. After the plant has flowered, they are going to grow more bitter, like many of our veggies and like any of our brassicas. Now, the leaves are tastier once cooked, whether they are leaves from the plant before it has flowered or after. I really enjoy them slivered and sauteed with some scrambled eggs, tossed in stews and chilies. They will impart a garlicky flavor to whatever you're cooking. They also make a really nice pesto. Let's see if I've got a photo. Yeah. So you can harvest, all that garlic mustard in your yard and just put it in a food processor. So leaves, stems, flowers, it matters not. Just puree them up with some olive oil, a touch of true garlic, and it makes a lovely pesto for pasta or bruschetta, what have you. And then here on the right-hand side, you can see, you can take that whole flowering head, dip it in some batter and fry it up along with your dandelion fritters. So just a real simple batter, flour, egg, water, and they're quite pretty too if you're having some friends over. Now, the root of garlic mustard, which I don't have a photo of, is also edible. It is going to be pencil thin, and this is a really easy plant to uproot. So the exact opposite of, say, dandelion. You can just pull the whole plant right up out of the ground, and I encourage you to do so. So that root you can then wash, peel, and dice and use it like you would horseradish root, or like you would a ginger in sautés and soups. You could infuse oil or vinegar. It's going to have a very spicy flavor. So whereas the leaves and the flower buds are more garlicky, that root is spicy. And then lastly, even the seed pods, you can eat those. They're going to have a mustard seed sort of flavor. And I would not try extracting the seeds from the pods. I would just dice the pods up and use them again in soups or stews or stir fries. And of course, the dandelion that we all know well. Scientific name is Taraxacum officinale. And that scientific name really lends some insight to this plant. So firstly, Taraxacum means disorder remedy. So what does that tell you? Definitely a medicinal plant. Officinale, anytime you see officinale or officinalis in a plant name, that tells you that that plant has a history of use in medicine. It was included in the US Pharmacopoeia, which was essentially a directory of plants, how to use them, for what ailments, what dosage. So long before we considered this plant a nasty little weed, we did appreciate it very much. It is not native to North America. Settlers brought this plant with them, purposely planted it in their gardens, and then it set seed and it naturalized throughout our landscape. Now, like garlic mustard, dandelion, you can pick to your heart's content and you can use nearly every single part of it. So I think y'all know where you may be able to find some dandelion on your lawn or in your garden or in the nearby park. Those flowering heads are edible. They are kind of like the icing on the cake, though. There's not a whole lot of nutrition there. You'll get some trace bioflavonoids. Again, they're lovely dipped in batter and fried. I also like to grab hold of that green cup that holds all those little florets, or what we typically call petals. Well, holds all those together, and then pull those yellow florets out in a tuft, and you can sprinkle those in, say, crepe batter, or add them to doughs. They come out beautifully in breads and muffins and cookies, or sprinkle them on a plate as a decorative sort of piece. Now, here's the good stuff with dandelion. So the leaves, of course, you can pluck those, eat them raw. They are going to have a bitter quality, and it can take a little bit of getting used to. I will be honest with you, the first time I ate a dandelion leaf, I was not impressed, but I kept at it. A lot of our wild greens do have a bitter touch to them, but bitter, remember, is a really excellent thing to include in our diet. Once our taste buds taste bitter, it gets salivary glands working, it gets bile flowing. It's like a wake-up call to our digestive tract to prepare to digest food, to assimilate nutrients and eliminate that which we don't need from our bodies. So bitter is good, and your leaves are going to be less bitter again before the plant has flowered. I would encourage you to combine the leaves with, say, a spring mix or kale, or use them as a nice touch, like you see here on this toast with some beet hummus and cheddar. Use them as an addition. Don't try and sit down and eat a whole bowl of dandelion greens. So dandelion leaves are medicinal because they are diuretic. So they will help with water retention, lowering blood pressure, and they also are very, very nutritious. So they're high in vitamin A, C, K, extremely high in potassium, a little bit of iron as well. And also another way to reduce the bitterness of your dandelion greens is to saute them with a little bit of vinegar, olive oil, some garlic. Lots of ways in which you could get creative with these. The roots of dandelion you could most certainly harvest this time of year. So early spring or fall is the best time to harvest your roots. These roots are going to be very high in something called inulin. And inulin is not a probiotic, but a prebiotic. So inulin is basically the food stuff for your probiotics or for your healthy gut flora. So think about that when you're eating your dandelion roots. They are also much tastier than you might expect from those bitter greens. The roots I do not find as bitter. You can wash, peel, dice, saute them. I like them with a little bit of soy sauce or tamari, some olive oil, some garlic. You can certainly also wash, peel, dice, and then simmer these roots for a hot tea. That is thought to be very effective on the liver. So essentially activating that liver energy and detoxifying the body. So white pine, now we're going to get into some trees here. So white pine and other members of the Pinus genus. So white pine is Pinus strobus, but this would also apply to pitch pine, let's see, red pine. So I do still encourage you to identify the pine that you have at hand. There are a lot of evergreens that we casually call pines that may not truly be pines, or they may be members of the pine family, but not of that Pinus genus. We could almost say that every member of the pine family is safe for consumption, but it's not quite that simple. But we can say that any member of the Pinus genus can safely be consumed in the way that I'm going to describe to you here. So white pine, I really like focusing on this one because it is so common. It's very easy to identify. White pine is going to have that brushy sort of appearance. It grows very tall, very straight, and will have branches put on in whorls or in circular arrangements around the trunk. And your white pine is always going to have 5 needles to 1 bundle. So those needles are not individually attached to the twig, rather they're grouped in a fascicle. So white pine is your only pine that's going to have 5 needles. A lot of our pines have 2 to 3 needles, so you really cannot go wrong in your identification this way. White pine too is going to produce the largest cones in our region. And this cone that you see here in this photo has not expanded its scales yet, so know that those cones can be much broader. The photo you see on the right-hand side is a young white pine. So oftentimes you'll have these towering mature white pines with these smaller saplings all around them. They do produce a lot of seeds. So white pine, for me, especially on the trail, is a great first aid plant. Those needles and the sap are strongly antibacterial. So think about this tree for any minor wounds you may be suffering from. So say you've fallen and scraped your knee, or you've scratched across some branches and you've got a minor cut that way. When Scott and I were hiking the long path, just to go on a minor detour here, New York State's long path, just a couple days before the end of the trail, he took quite the fall. We were getting some water from a creek, and he slid down the rocky shore there and really gashed up his knee. We were very happy that evening to have a white pine at camp. We made tea from the needles, and then we did use that as a wash for his open gashes there, and no infection occurred. This is also a tree that I've used when I've gotten splinters on the trail. So a little trick, you can take the sap from white pine, just that sap that you would naturally see oozing out of the tree, and apply that to a stuck splinter. Let it sit. Just let that sap sit on there overnight at least. It may take a little bit longer. And sure enough, that splinter will just be working its way up ever so slightly so that you can pull it out with some tweezers or pull it out with your fingernails. So little trick with the sap, that's also antibacterial. So you could even apply that to a wound. Now, internally, white pine makes a delicious tea too. So that same infusion that I used for Scott's knee, you could also have a tea to drink that would be antibacterial for any kind of bacterial infections you may be suffering from. A great tea to ingest when you're dealing with a sinus infection. This tea is going to be lemony flavored, kind of piney tasting for lack of a better descriptor. It's also going to be diuretic, warming to the body, and can really be helpful as an expectorant and as a decongestant. So I think of white pine, this is like your medicine cabinet this time of year when there's not a lot of other things leafing out or in flower. So birch, another favorite first aid plant, and also just a really tasty woodland tea. So scientific name Betula lenta, that applies to black birch and Betula alleghaniensis. So those, and that's yellow birch. So black and yellow birch are the two birches that I'm talking about tonight, for the reason that these birches are highest in a particular chemical called methyl salicylic acid, or methyl salicylate. So methyl salicylate is an anti-inflammatory and an analgesic. So you can imagine why this tree may be so helpful if you're on trail after a hard day of hiking. Now, let's go through, before I get too much into the medicinal benefits, let's just go through, how do you know when you've got a black or a yellow birch? So firstly, when your leaves are present, which I realize they're not now, when your leaves are present, black and yellow birch are always going to have leaves in pairs, and they will be sharply toothed, and specifically doubly toothed. So what that means, you can see that those teeth there, it's like each primary tooth has teeth as well, has secondary teeth. So that's somewhat unique. That's going to help you to distinguish a black or a yellow birch from, say, a beech that just has those singular larger teeth, or even a cherry leaf that just has many tiny teeth, not that doubly toothed feature. Now, right now we don't have those leaves, so this is when we look to the bark. So black birch is on the left-hand side. That has gray, smooth bark with prominent lenticels. And lenticels are those horizontal lines that you see on the tree there. They are the pores through which the tree exchanges gases. On the right-hand side, you've got yellow birch, which also has prominent lenticels, but you can see the color is entirely different, and really the texture of the bark is entirely different as well. It's got that sort of peeling quality, but it does not have the peeling quality that paper birch has, where you've got these large plates of bark that are just peeling off literally like sheets of paper. To me, yellow birch looks kind of like a big cat came along and just scraped right across that bark. Now, black birch is one of our most common trees, especially at our lower elevations. It's a tree that will often come in very plentifully once an area has been logged. It's a tree that benefits from an open canopy, so that's why you do see it in those successional forests. It's also a tree that the deer are not the quickest to eat, so as the other saplings are coming in, birch is second choice. Yellow birch, I see that at higher elevations. I did see a lot of it on the Finger Lakes Trail as well. I saw a ton of yellow birch in the Catskills. If you venture up to the Adirondacks, you'll see a lot of it there as well. And yellow birch can hybridize with white birch or paper birch. So sometimes you'll kind of see something in between. But what we can do with yellow birch and black birch, those twigs, so any of your growing twigs that are still green and pliable when you break them, those can be steeped or lightly simmered in hot water for tea that will act kind of sort of like an aspirin. So if you're suffering from muscular aches and pains, general soreness, drink this tea up. It will take the edge off. You can even just chew on those toothpicks. So don't feel like you have to have your camp stove with you. If you're out for a walk and you're just feeling like you need a little help, go ahead and break off a birch twig and just chew on it. It's perfectly safe that way. Now, the other way that you can be completely certain that you've got black or yellow birch is when you break that twig, bring it to your nose, and you should strongly smell a wintergreen aroma. If you don't have that wintergreen aroma, perhaps you have another kind of birch, or you could have, my next guess would be a cherry. Cherry can resemble birch, black cherry specifically, quite a bit. So just look for that wintergreen smell. And on a side note, black birch, that's the tree that was used in our old-time root beers or birch beers. So they would tap this tree for its watery sap, simmer that sap down, and then combine that with a tea of sassafras roots and wild sarsaparilla roots. Which brings me to our next tree, sassafras. So sassafras albidum, certainly a lot of sassafras on the Finger Lakes Trail. Of course, our flowers will not be out yet, but they will blossom very early in the spring. And sassafras is a tree that you can still identify in the winter when you have no flowers or leaves. So let's see here. So the bark of sassafras is going to be furrowed, and I would describe it as sort of crisscrossing. It's not, these furrows are not in perfectly vertical rows. And the twigs, which is something you can see, whoops, sorry. You guys can't see that, but my computer just came off its stand. The twigs, which you can see in the wintertime, they tend to be green in color. So the more mature part of the branch there will be brown, but then as you get to more of the new growth, that's going to be rather green and somewhat mottled, almost looking a little camouflage-like. And then your twigs are upward arching, kind of like a candelabra. So that's how I spot sassafras in the wintertime. And then like birch, when you break a sassafras twig, you're going to get a strong aroma. It's not going to be minty, but it's going to be almost lemony in flavor, or an aroma, lemony with a little bit of spice. Now, let me just real quick, these are what your leaves are going to look like when they are present. These are obviously autumn foliage. But sassafras leaves are really unique because you've got 3 different shaped leaves all on one tree. So you've got one leaf that's shaped like a mitten, another one that's shaped kind of like a T-Rex foot, that's what the kids like to say, and then one leaf that's entire, or what we would call just simple, so no lobes. But sassafras, which was used in our old-time root beer, we can make a tea of those twigs by, just like the birch, breaking them off the tree, breaking them into smaller pieces, simmering them in hot water. They are very much considered a purifying herb, or that's considered a purifying beverage. It's going to reduce stagnancy, energize the body, bring some nice warmth in. This is a great tea to have on a cold winter's day or on a chilly early spring day. Really just helps to kind of take the dampness out of the bones. And that's one way in which sassafras was used traditionally, again, by those old timers in the Appalachian Hills. This was considered tea or an herb for rheumatism, so to remove the achiness and the soreness from joints. And wild sarsaparilla, so scientific name Aurelia nudicalis. This is a plant that honestly took me a little while to get to know when I first was getting to know my plants, for the reason that it can be kind of nondescript. And right now you're not going to have the foliage of wild sarsaparilla, but again, it's one of the first ones that's going to come up once our temps start to warm. The leaves of wild sarsaparilla to me always kind of look like they're a little deformed. They are rarely uniform. What you're seeing here is actually one leaf that is divided 3 ways, and each of those leaves are made up of 5 leaflets, if that makes sense. So it's like it's divided doubly, it's divided twice. So 5 to 7 leaflets, more often 5 than 7. And it's just like usually a couple of those leaflets are just kind of stunted or strangely formed. Now in the spring, do be mindful, your leaflets can resemble, they're going to have like a purplish, reddish color to them. and they'll look very shiny. So they could be confused with poison ivy if you aren't being cautious. On the right-hand side are what the spring flowers are going to look like of wild sarsaparilla. So they really kind of mimic the division of those leaves. You're going to have a branching flowering cluster, and you'll have that one single three-way branching cluster right beneath that branching cluster of leaves. But what we are interested in with wild sarsaparilla is the root. So the root, you can see it's very slender. Technically, it's a rhizome, so it's like an underground extension of the stalk. And then there are little rootlets that come off of that. But this too can be thrown in with your sassafras twigs and your birch twigs, or you can just have it all by itself, chopped up, simmered in hot water for tea. It will have a little bit of a spicy flavor to it. I wouldn't say it's certainly not strong like cinnamon, but it has that warming kind of quality. And for anyone out there that already is familiar with various medicinal herbs, this is related to ginseng. And ginseng is a plant that you are very unlikely to come across in the forest. And if you were to, I would ask you to please leave it be because the populations are severely dwindling. But wild sarsaparilla would make a great substitute. So this tea is also thought to just bring some fresh energy, some vitality into the body, and essentially assist you in adapting to stress. So another plant that could be helpful if you're out for a hard hike. And wild sarsaparilla, I will find it growing. It's very adaptable itself. So I've found it on rocky terrain. I've found it beneath, evergreens and deciduous trees. Usually, if you're seeing a couple of plants, let your vision kind of spread out and you'll see a whole lot. It grows, I'd say about 1.5 feet tall. Wintergreen, scientific name Gaultheria procumbens. So wintergreen, although the name might suggest that it's a member of the mint family, it is not. It's actually a member of the blueberry family or the heath family. This is an evergreen plant that you can by all means find right now. I see wintergreen in acidic soil, and you are apt to find acidic soil beneath other evergreens. So pines, eastern hemlocks, you'll find wintergreen growing amidst moss and rocks and heavy leaf litter. It can be an easy one to miss because it is a very humble little plant. It grows no more than I don't have a photo of it from its side here. Grows no more than a few inches or maybe 5 inches tall, and it will never put on more leaves than what you see here in this photo. And each of those leaves is, at best about 1 to 2 inches long. The leaves do have a leathery feel, so that can help you to distinguish it. And each leaf does have, what you'll see in that left-hand picture there, tiny, tiny little teeth along the outer edge. And marking each of those teeth, a little hair extends from the vein. So this leaf is what we call ciliate. But those very finer points will help you to distinguish it from, some of your other kind of leathery evergreen leaves that you may find in the forest. This time of year too, the undersides are going to be speckled and black, often, not always. Those are actually the glands of the leaf that produce the oil that makes this leaf so fragrant. So wintergreen also contains methyl salicylate, the same chemical that's in your black and yellow birches. So if you crack this leaf, you're going to get a minty smell. And you can treat wintergreen leaves just the same as you would your birch twigs. So you can nibble on these leaves, you can simmer them or steep them in hot water for tea, great for muscular aches and pains. And I've got this fun little photo here of this I guess he's an elf. I'm not sure. This elf here holding Clark's Tea-Berry Chewing Gum because wintergreen is a plant that at one time was harvested, very much so, and sold at markets because it was used as a flavoring in candies and gums. Another name for this plant is indeed teaberry. Big companies even, I mean, Pepto-Bismol used wintergreen in their formula. It was methyl salicylate. Now they use a synthesized version of methyl salicylate, but it was extracted from this plant at one time. And in addition to those leaves, the berries are edible. So this is a really fun little trailside nibble. They're going to taste strongly minty. Give it your best shot if you want to collect a bunch, but you'll probably be out there for a while. Not every plant produces berries, and those that do only produce, a few at very best. Now here we get to a very popular wild edible, ramps, or as I learned in New York State, because I learned about ramps down in North Carolina, y'all call them wild leeks. But wild leeks, ramps, same thing, scientific name, Allium trichocum. This is a plant I saw a ton of on the Finger Lakes Trail, which I found mighty amazing because when I did live down south in the mountains where you think you'd find a lot of ramps, I never came across them, but there were virtual carpets of these on the Finger Lakes. That said, this is a plant that's highly sought after, certainly a plant that has been over harvested at times. It is still considered secure, but I very, very, very much encourage you to only pick the leaves of this plant. If you are going to harvest the bulb, please, please, please leave the rootlets. Let's see if I've got I don't think no. Please leave the rootlets on that bulb in the ground. Now, I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit for those of you who don't know ramps. Ramps are a wild onion. They're going to have an oniony, garlicky flavor, and the whole plant can be eaten. The leaf, the bulb, but when you harvest the whole bulb and take the rootlets with it, that's it. That's the end of that plant. It's never coming back. So if you leave the rootlets, if you leave part of that bulb in the ground, it can regenerate from that. And better yet, if you leave the whole bulb in the ground and say only pluck one of those leaves from the plant, so there is one remaining, it can continue to photosynthesize, send up a flowering stalk, go to flower, seed, drop that seed and make more ramps. So keep that in mind. The leaves are delicious. Yes, the bulb has a slightly stronger flavor, but the leaves really have their own unique, very distinctive, garlicky, oniony taste that you can enjoy raw or cooked. I really enjoy, and this is a cluster here of ramps. I really enjoy ramps, firstly as a pesto. So you just puree those with some olive oil. No need to add garlic at all. I enjoy them with eggs. So here we've got a little quiche with purple dead nettle and ramp leaves as well. We aren't going to touch on purple dead nettle tonight, but that's another nice early spring wild edible. No relation to stingy nettle. But ramps, they can be tricky to come across. You're going to find them under the canopy. Once the trees leaf out, your ramp leaves are going to wither away. So they like to grow before the trees leaf out when there's that nice abundant sun, cool weather. I often see them on north-facing slopes. They like very damp soil. So this is by all means a woodland plant. Wild mustard. Oh my goodness, did I see so much wild mustard on the Finger Lakes Trail. um, the wild mustard that I'm referring to tonight is Brassica. SPP means that we can use any species of Brassica. Brassica is the genus. There are certainly other genre of wild mustard out there. I mean, think about garlic mustard. That's a kind of wild mustard. Olearia. Um, However, easier for just to kind of focus in on one right now. But wild mustard, I saw great fields of because it's often used as a cover crop. I also saw it growing along country roads and kind of on the edges of civilization, where the trail would kind of meander into those more human disturbed areas. I will say, please be mindful of harvesting wild mustard, from farm fields or places that would be heavily fertilized. Um, Wild mustard can harbor nitrates, which in high quantities can be carcinogenic. So just be mindful of where you're picking your wild mustard. Certainly, perfectly fine to pick alongside the trail, um, but just be mindful of those places where it was purposely planted and the soil may really be heavily tended to. So wild mustard, because we have different species, you're going to see some different qualities. But with your wild brassicas, you are typically going to see yellow flowers that are four-petaled and in a cross kind of configuration. And your leaves, which you can see on the right-hand side, are usually either divided or nearly so. So they've got, very strong lobes. And those lobes can vary anywhere from, say, 3 to 7 or 9. And this plant here, too, it grows with basal leaves to start, so leaves that arise from the soil, and then it sends up this tall stalk that'll be leafy as well with the branching flowering cluster. And that's what I'm showing there on the left-hand side. So wild mustard is going to taste just like you might think it would. Kind of like your mustard greens that you might grow in your garden or purchase at the store. Going to have a nice spicy sort of flavor, a mustardy sort of flavor. You can eat the leaves raw, you can eat them cooked. I really like, just like with garlic mustard, the unopened flower buds or the just open flowered, so flowers like what you see here. Really tasty just while you're hiking along, just to pluck some of those off, pop them in your mouth. Just have a nice spicy sort of flavor. And most of our mustards too are non-native, naturalized. So, feel free to pick those as you wish. The seed pods too, like garlic mustard, can also be eaten. And again, don't worry about trying to extract those little tiny mustard seeds. Just eat them whole or chop them up, throw them in soups or layer them up in your trailside sandwiches, what have you. But this is one that you'll certainly come across as soon as our temps start to warm. And sometimes even in winter, I will find wild mustard greens. So this brings me to my very last, I can't say plant because it's not actually a plant. This is a lichen. So old man's beard, scientific name is Usnea. And again, you see that SPP because this would refer to any species of Usnea. There are hundreds of species of Usnea. As far as using this as a medicine, it doesn't matter which species you have. But lichen is a combination of an algae and a fungus that have come together, formed a symbiotic relationship, and in turn created a lichen. So we call this lichen that will only be growing on wood, on trees, never on rocks. We call this old man's beard because it looks kind of like hair hanging from the tree. And here's another photo. So that photo on the right is Usnea when it's in its reproductive stage. So those discs are where the spores are formed. And Those will be blown on the wind to their next substrate. And then Usnea, you're going to identify and distinguish from other lichens by the fact that it has these sort of two layers. So you've got this outer casing that you can crack with your fingernail, and inside you're going to find a thread that should be either pure white or just ever so slightly pink. If it is bright orange or bright red, you've got some other kind of lichen, or if you don't have that inner thread, you have another sort of lichen. So that thread is important for identification. And again, this is only going to grow on trees and on bark, on wood. Now, old man's beard is one of those lichens that I either see a ton of or I don't see it at all. It is all about, the niche. So I saw a lot of old man's beard at higher elevations in the Catskills. Again, you'll certainly see it in the Adirondacks. It is a lichen that requires a lot of moisture. It also does like sun. So if you think about it, those higher elevations, it's going to get more sunlight. And it requires nice, healthy air. So lichens cannot grow where there is a lot of air pollution. They just are not going to thrive. So, in theory, one would think that perhaps that mountain air does them good. So Usnea, great first aid lichen. So this is antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, antiprotozoa. So think about that in regards to, say, Giardia, which is something we could encounter as hikers. What you can do is make either a tea or a tincture, which is an alcohol extract of this lichen. What you would do if you're going to make a tincture is just harvest this lichen, and I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but harvest the lichen, tear it into finer pieces, put it in a mason jar, cover it over with a high-proof alcohol, something like vodka, let it sit for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then strain off that lichen, and you can take that alcohol extract by the dropper full. So this is only something you're going to take when you feel you're fighting an infection of some kind, and you wouldn't take it for more than a couple weeks. You can really treat it like an antibiotic. Great for fighting respiratory conditions, urinary tract infections, and any kind of bacterial or viral infection. You can also use the tea topically for cleaning out wounds and such. Now, as far as harvesting lichen grows really, really slow. So we want to be respectful of that. Know that when you are harvesting Usnea or any other kind of lichen, what you're taking took a really, really long time to grow. So take only what you need, take only where it is abundant, and even better, a great time to harvest Usnea is after a windstorm, when all that Usnea is just laying around on the ground. Pick that Usnea up, take that with you, rather than harvesting from a place where it is actively growing. So to wrap it up, and I'm eager to hear your questions. To wrap it up, I would love to just share with you guys a couple of books. So this first book here on the left, A Guide to the Edible and Medicinal Plants of the Finger Lakes Trail. Most all of the plants that we talked about tonight are in this book, plus about 30 some others, complete with color photos and recipes and all those identification tips that I passed along. So certainly a book to take with you on your hikes or just use, wherever you are is certainly applicable to landscape beyond the Finger Lakes Trail and throughout the Northeast and along the Appalachians. And the book on the right, Love and the Long Path, is my most recent book, which is about my long hike with my fiance, Scott, on New York State's Long Path. And woven throughout are the many plants that we used along our journey and appreciated for both food and medicine. And of course, just lots of adventure in there, what it's like to hike all those miles together as a couple. So I thank y'all. I'm gonna get out of my screen here. Let's see, I'm gonna try.
Heather, the only question that we got in here that you haven't addressed is somebody asked when you were talking about the pine tea, how many needles to use? How do you make the pine tea?
Oh, okay. How many needles? Here, I'm trying to get back to there we are. Okay, now I can see you again. So how many needles? Great question. So I use like a finger's width essentially. So, kind of like a finger's thickness per cup of tea. But white pine, honestly, too, it is so safe that if you use twice that, it's not going to be harmful. So, don't feel like you have to get that measurement just right.
And the only other question was asking about if people would receive the slides so they could use those to identify plants. And I would say, please purchase Heather's book. I put the link to her website in the chat, and I'll send it out again afterwards. And there weren't any other questions. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, whichever you prefer. Somebody else just asked what makes a poultice.
What makes a poultice? Okay, yeah. So a poultice is plant matter that's been moistened and mashed up, often moistened with warm water, and then you can apply that topically to a wound. So, a poultice, chickweed would make a great poultice because that's a really moist plant to begin with. It would be soft on the skin. Usnea would make a great poultice, especially since it's very absorbent of liquid. Something like pine would not make the best poultice, just because you can imagine it's just not going to be very absorbent that way.
And somebody asks if they can use saran wrap over poultice to keep it against the skin.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great idea. Great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've gotten some thanks in the chat, Heather. And I want to say thank you again for doing this. This is always a well-attended event. I always learn something and I just enjoy it so much, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you. Again, go to Heather's website, danielhiker.com, and you can purchase her books. She also offers some hikes, and I want to talk to you, Heather, about maybe offering a hike at our fall weekend event.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so we'll see if we can get you involved there. And I want to thank everybody again for coming. Please check out our other available events coming up in the next few months. Please get out on the FLT, get signed up for the FLT 60, become a member, become a donor, volunteer. Thank you to those of you who already do all of the above. So thank you, and have a very good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.